Welcome to Mattowarrior's Metal Madness, episode 7. And this episode, there's no interview. It's just a bunch of ranting, and it's going to be just me giving my thoughts on stuff. But of course, first we have the news. So, of course, I'm going to go to Blabbermouth for my news that I'm going to go over, and then I do have some other stuff that I want to actually lead up to the topic of today's episode I decided to make it about. So I'm just going to go to the first page of Blabbermouth and read what's going on in the metal, hard rock, and shitty metal world. Snot's Mickey Doling calls out Limp Bizkit's Fred Durst over upcoming tour. How dare you, man? What? No idea what he's talking about, but, and Limp Bizkit, it's called Still Sucks. Still Sucks tour. That's awesome. Ex-Iron Maiden singer Paul Di'Anno to be fitted for a custom leg brace in preparation for surgery. Wow. Hard to believe we're getting this old. He's... Some of us here, or some of these guys, I'm not as old as Paul Di'Anno, obviously, but I'm actually, I'm not that old, but yeah, it's just Paul Di'Anno, a leg brace. Well, at least he'll be able to walk and stuff, probably. Sacred Reich frontman Phil Rind hospitalized. Philadelphia and Baltimore shows canceled. Oh, that sucks. Rich Ward has no problem being the number 2 guy in Fozzy. Okay. Isn't he in Stuck Mojo, too? Aaron Lewis question. Okay, I'm not going to read that. I'm trying to stay away from politics, of course. Aaron Lewis. Tommy Lee's son. Oh, wow. There's a lot of stuff in the news lately. Tommy Lee's son and Metallica, Lars Ulrich's son's in a band. And who else? James Hetfield. I don't know. No idea what it is. Okay. Beartooth. I have no idea who that is. Beartooth's Caleb Shomo says Metallica's Enter Sandman still has the heaviest riffs of all time. Okay. Ronnie James Dio documentary, Dreamers Never Die, South by Southwest, Striper, band, Wasp, Chris Holmes is in second week of radiation treatment for throat and neck cancer. Wow. Well, I wish him well, man. I listen to a lot of Wasp. So, Queensryche performed in Los Angeles during his North America tour with Judas Priest. Oh, and more, Ted Nugent has some opinions about politics. Okay. He has his finger on the pulse. All right. I think no one has their finger on the pulse, really. There are so many different opinions that are just on, dare I say, both sides of things that I get sick of hearing about. But anyways, move on. Molly Cruz, Nikki Sixx to guest on this Sunday's episode of American Idol. Okay. Whatever. Bruce Dickinson. Fear of the Duck. Bruce Dickinson. Fear of the Duck. Bruce Dickinson was done with the lockdown after the first year. Yeah. Anyways. Chuck Billy says Dave Lombardo has expressed interest in playing on the next Testament studio album. Cool. Always good to hear. I have the first Phantomas album. It's pretty cool. Ghosts Impera tops charts in Germany and Sweden. Oh, big surprise, really? Not really. Skid Row's upcoming album. Yeah, I wonder how that's going to go. They have Nick Raskulinich. Oh, he's a big deal. Yeah, he's worked with a lot of people. Next Judas Priest. Glenn Tipton, next Judas Priest album would be what every fan will want. Okay, well, I don't know what that means, but here we go. James Hetfield's son Castor released his debut album from Bastardane. I listened to a little bit of it. It's not bad. It sounds kind of like his father is into, actually, nowadays, like the sludgier kind of stuff. Decapitated announces cancer culture album instead of cancel culture. That might be kind of cool. Def Leppard's Phil Collins says making Diamond Star Halo's album was constantly exciting. Remotely. Ugh. Yeah, whatever. Talus releases first new music in 37 years. Cool. Intermounting Flame. That sounds like a reference to like Mahavishnu Orchestra, actually. I don't know. The Scientology. I don't know if that's a Scientology reference. I'm going to have to look that up. Just kidding. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Joe Satriani. Well, Return to Forever we're into. I mean, Chick Corea was into that stuff, but he was in Return to Forever, not Mahavishnu. Joe Satriani releases new music video for Pumpin', okay. Exodus releases music video for The Fires of Division. I watched this song. I'm going to give them a little props here. This song really kills. Really good song. I was actually pleasantly surprised by the song. There was another song that came out I wasn't as keen on, but this song some really killer riffs. And really killer vocals and stuff. Static X? What? Never mind. Cancels 2022 European tour dates due to the ongoing situation in the continent. Okay. Dream Theater's James Bree unveils details new solo album. Beautiful Shade of Grey. That sounds a little familiar with prog fans, obviously. Two prog fans, it should. Blind Guardian releases new single, Secrets of the American Gods. I listened to it. It's all right. You know. I don't know. Obviously, and if you heard my last interview, you know, the last interview I did, I'm sure I talked about Blind Guardian a little bit, maybe in a, you know, it happens to everybody. It's, you know, sometimes bands go to direction you don't like as much. You know, it just happens. It's not anybody's fault. You know, it's like a divorce, I guess. I don't know. I like their speed metal stuff and some of their semi-progressive stuff, and you know, like I even like I liked At the Edge of Time a lot for some reason, and maybe this will surprise me. I don't know. I didn't like their last studio album, and their orchestral album I thought was okay. Sepultura joined by Danko Jones. I've never heard Danko Jones. I keep hearing that name all the time, but I never heard him. Here, Apocalyptica's new single, I'll Get Through It, featuring Geezer Butler. Rush releases Limelight, Moving Pictures, 40th anniversary, Fozzy, Deftones, Tool, yeah. Greta Van Fleet, the guitarist, hospitalized with pneumonia. Wow, that's messed up. More Ronnie James Dio. Sharon Osbourne joins Piers Morgan on TV, on UK's Talk TV. All right, I'm going to say this. I don't give a shit. I try not to diss a lot of people on this podcast. Fuck Sharon Osbourne. That's it. That's all I got to say. People know. I wouldn't, by the way. But yeah, I don't care what people say. You know, I don't care if I'll never have an interview with Ozzy or something. Sharon Osbourne has a toxic personality as far as, you know, as far as like musicians go. I mean, just traditionally, historically, she does. I'm sorry, you know, not sorry. You know what she did to Iron Maiden, what she did to Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake, Jake E. Lee, Phil Soussan. And I'm not going to blame her only. Ozzy obviously takes some of the blame, but, you know, it is what it is, you know. A lot of people have stories. A lot of people don't want to even come forward, too, about it. Like, there's musicians I've heard about who have come forward who have said, basically, you know, they don't want to say stuff because they don't want to get in trouble, you know, that reputation. You know, I've heard about that happening because Sharon Osbourne's power and stuff. Psycho Las Vegas moves to Resorts World. No idea what that means. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame explains why it won't pull Dolly Parton from ballot. Okay, I don't know. Travis Barker. This is kind of hilarious. Travis Barker on Kourtney Kardashian's Cannibal Corpse shirt controversy. I guess she wore a Cannibal Corpse shirt. Why? I don't know. And I guess he's defending her for wearing it. Come on. I mean, I hate the fashion thing with metal shirts, okay? it's I don't think it's, and the whole thing, it's not about like whether it's like, I mean, it's offensive because metalheads have been, I wouldn't say, I mean, they're already outcasts, they were for so many years. And when you see some like vapid celebrity wear a metal shirt that you could have been made fun of in like middle school or high school for, you get pissed off because it's like they don't really know what it's like. Now it's something funny or cool or ironic. Overkill's new album won't arrive before April 2023. I've seen them twice. Great band to see live. Hearts Ann Wilson offered to front new band. She offered to front new band featuring Led Zeppelin members. Featuring Led Zeppelin members. I threw my hat in the ring. I'm going to say this right now. That would have been really cool because she would have done a great job. I saw the Stairway to Heaven thing that she did years back, and with Robert Plant cried and stuff. And I'll admit I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin. I'm not a huge Robert Plant fan. I like Led Zeppelin, but I think Ann Wilson took that sound, those early Hard albums, and just took it to another level. And I think she would have done that. If her and Nancy Wilson were involved in the songwriting with Jimmy Page and all that, and John Paul Jones especially, because he's the most underrated guy of the band, it would have been pretty cool. That was a good idea. Speaking of Led Zeppelin influenced bands, Rush's Geddy Lee, Carriage, Driver, whatever. Boring. Creators, Melee, I don't know how to pronounce it, Petroza, Real War is not metal, it's hell on earth. That's good. It's good he's saying that. It's good. Stop the war. Good. Okay. Well, that sounded a little political. Sorry. But yeah, it is hell on earth. Sammy Hagar. To release Cocktail Hits 85 Personal Favorites from the Red Rocker book. Okay. He's trying to really be the Jimmy Buffett of rock, isn't he? Slipknot. Okay. So this is a really good essay sort of / interview with Wasp, Blackie Lawless. The actual headline is misleading. If you read it, it's really good. I highly recommend reading the whole thing, and maybe I will. Wasp, Blackie Lawless, Blast, Bully Putin. Today I'm Ukrainian. I'd actually recommend reading it. I'm not gonna read it. I've decided not to. I got other stuff to talk about in this episode. Def Leppard announces Diamond Store Halo's album, kick single. Yeah, George Lynch second instrumental album. Cool. Korn cancels Russia shows. I'm sure. Yeah. Anyways, Skunk Anansie. That's a very 90s band I heard about. What happened with that band is I never heard about them in the States, but I'd see them on the cover of Kerrang or Metal Hammer UK and stuff, like with these. There was these like import bookstores that I used to go to, and you'd see that name all the time. They were really hot in the 90s. Not in America, but in Britain for sure. Former Scorpions drummer Herman Rebel, whatever. I'm just kind of going over stuff that's not that interesting, I'm just saying. Ghost. Now this is kind of funny. Steve I guests on debut episode of Yngwie Malmsteen's Coffee Talk. So Yngwie Malmsteen has a podcast. I don't know what to say about that. I am the living legend of podcasts. I even am better than Joe Rogan. I know all the podcasting there is to know. He's just I can't even handle it. Anyways, I'm not going to listen to that. I love Yngwie Malmsteen, by the way, but Korn, Phil. Now this is an interesting headline. Phil Anselmo wants to use his Rob Halford style vocal range again for old school metal project. Now there's a lot of controversy with this because people say he can't do it anymore. He probably couldn't do it, blah blah blah. Now we've seen some miracles, happen, with a lot of singers can regain some of their voice. Now I remember Jim Gillette and Nitro like reuniting or whatever a couple years back, and it was kind of honestly not Nitro. It was more of just death metal project, but the former members of Nitro. I think the Lamb of God drummer was in there too. And he really didn't, years before he said, I can regain my high range vocals. But of course he did not, because he just growls the whole time for that. But Phil Anselmo, I'll say this. So do I think he can do it? I think it will be difficult, but it's not impossible unless there's actual damage to his vocal cords. I know these, a lot of singers probably have that, but can he do it? Could he do it? Possible. It's plausible. Is it going to be difficult? Yes. Get a vocal trainer. Obviously, if he's doing this, knowing who he is, what he's about, I know he's probably clean. That's his business, of course. That's his business if he's clean or not. With drugs or alcohol. If either he's on a lot of drugs or he's clean, it's just are you crazy? No, he's not. I think he could probably try it. I'll give you an example. Rob Halford himself, you heard him on, what's that album called? God, there was one after after Nostradamus, the one after that, which I wasn't a big fan of, but it was okay. Not the newest one, Firepower. But, some of the vocals, even on Nostradamus, he was kind of pushing it a little bit. But recent tours, he quit smoking, and he's hidden some notes that he hasn't done in 20 years. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible to regain some of your range. I don't believe it. I don't believe it's impossible. So I think he could do some of that stuff. Now, Phil Anselmo also should push the remaining estates of the Darryls to do a reissue of Power Metal, because that's one of the best Pantera albums there is, and he's actually regained respect. It looks like he's regained some of the respect for that, So I think Phil, I will root for him in this case, because I want to hear this, because I really like the high. I like Power Metal and Cowboys from Hell quite a bit. So Glenn Tipton, speaking of Judas Priest, rejoins Judas Priest on stage. Valerie Bertinelli, I didn't break up Van Halen. I don't think she did. Anyways, I'm just skipping ahead. I'm just going to skip stuff I don't find really interesting. Gene Simmons has a political opinion. I don't want to hear about it. Sharon Osbourne wrote a book. Ugh. Speaking of Sharon Osbourne, who the hell is going to read that book, I don't even know. It sounds terrible. I don't know. People there. She has fans. Obviously, it's dumb to say that she doesn't. Rush. Name. Here we go. This is one that hits close to home. Ex-Mattowarrior guitarist Ross the Boss Blast Tyrant Joey DeMeo says Battle Hymns re-recording sucks. So when bands re-record their albums nowadays, it's it's like a 30 or 40-year-old album, and they do it. It's just it loses its spontaneity and its power a lot of the time. Speaking, pun unintended, with Manowar, but yeah, it definitely. He also disses in this interview. He disses the lower tuning and stuff. It just sucks. It lacks the energy that was there when a band starts, when a band re-records one of their early albums. There's no reason to, other than contract stuff, sometimes they'll do that. Even Suicidal Tendencies did that really early on. They were one of the first bands I heard do that. So they re-recorded their first album in 1991 or 2, and it was from 83. It wasn't that bad. It had Rocky George solos added on, which is kind of cool. I love Rocky George. So, yeah, it's one of those things that it's meaningless and it doesn't really do anything. So there's no real reason why Manowar should have re-recorded 2 other albums, which is Battle Hymns and Kings of Metal. And another thing about that is that it's their last album that they did, The Lord of Steel, the production kind of sucked. Just being straight out, I didn't like the production on that. the re-recording productions were a lot smoother, than that. I don't what happened, It's dumb. There was a few songs on the re-recordings that I liked. I think on Kings of Metal, like they added some stuff, but yeah, it's just stupid. It's just dumb when a band does that. Do all your albums live, like do it live with a new lineup and then record that. And because live albums are often overdubbed anyways. So, but yeah, it's a stupid choice. First album is a classic, and so is Kings of Metal. And why they chose those two? Because those two were actually recorded in the first place really well. Even Battle Hymns. I think Into Glory Ride sounded a little worse, because it was a demo, even though it's probably my favorite one. Hail to England sounds a little rough around the edges too, and so does Sign of the Hammer. But that Battle Hymn sounded really good. It was, they did a really good job on the production on that one. And obviously Kings of Metal sounds great, So I don't know why they did it. It was dumb. So he's right. He's absolutely right. One of my favorite bands, obviously. Candlebox is focus of documentary, blah, blah, blah. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to this interesting news I'm trying to find. Let's see, I'm going to look it up. Oh, DSI does a tour. I'm probably going to go see that. Boring. Blah, 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 blah. More stuff I think I read last time. Kid Rock. Corey Taylor. It's Blabbermouth is usually the same suspects every time. It's all the same people. So I'm going to go to something else that's interesting discussion, which will lead into another discussion that I find really fascinating and just a subject I wanted to talk about. Obviously, this is not going to be about this episode is not going to have something special as far as an interview. The next one will probably have an interview. I do have someone in mind that I've been talking to that I think really would be a cool interview. So this is really interesting. I'm trying to find the exact. It's quite strange that this is an admission. So you remember the Pearl Jam Motley Crue ruckus. Well, this is okay. So speaking of Motley Crue, there is an infamous story, and it has been told a million times about Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig. The members of Motley Crue came in and were watching one of the two bands. I don't know if it was Black Flag or Misfits. I think it was Black Flag. Glenn and Henry, got off stage, and somehow they wanted to kick Motley Crue's ass, so they chased him out, and they chased him down the block. This is just a classic story. So I like both Motley Crue, I like Motley Crue, Black Flag, and Misfits. I grew up ostensibly with all three because I stole this tape from this record store of Too Fast for Love. So I always liked that because my ex-brother-in-law said, "Oh, the first two Motley Crue are great, blah blah blah." So I stole a tape. It's one of my short shoplifting career when I was 13 or 12 or 13 or whatever. Well, I think the reason why I did it was because I read about Nikki Sixx stealing his instruments. So I'm like, oh, let's steal their album. He stole his first bass or whatever. So this is interesting because there's a new Metal Edge site. And, remember Metal Edge. So what's really interesting, I'm just going to read this. I'm going to read some of the interview. You lived in LA with Black Flag during the early 80s. Did you have any contact with Sunset Strip metal bands? Rollins, I remember back in those days, Black Flag had some very heavy associates. People who were very good at being bad. One of them, a dead-eyed guy who I won't name, was kind of a dirty deeds done dirt cheap type. That's pretty funny. One night I was walking on Sunset Boulevard and saw a hair metal guy who ended up being extremely famous, successful, dealing cocaine. Holy shit. The dead-eyed guy was standing behind him just making sure everybody played well. Looked at me, his face was a billboard for keep walking, you don't know me, so I did. Another time, the Misfits were sound checking at the Whiskey. I was there hanging out, and Vince Neil was at the bar. One or two of the Misfits started yelling at him for what reason, I don't know why. Vince Neil left quickly, and Misfits laughed. This is where it gets interesting. Black Flag would often record at a studio, and that might relate to that other, I don't think that was the same story, but it might be a different one. Black Flag would often record at a studio called Total Access. It was cheap and sometimes to save money. Spot and I, who's a producer, would go in at midnight and I'd do vocals. One night we were walking and Wasp was walking out. I remember how tall they all were. I asked what they were doing. I was told it was demos. This is where we were working on the cheap to try to make the My War album. I think it was, and was where Wasp was making demos. The fiscal differences of the major labels and the indie labels at that time were huge. I don't know if they were what is considered a hair band, but that happened. I'm not sure what record the demos were for. It was actually the first album, but just to help Rollins with that. I have their first 3 albums. Now that is an admission. So this is another, and that's like to me that's a bombshell. That Henry Rollins actually owns the first Wasp albums. I actually can't believe that. It's hard to believe, like he would actually admit that. And obviously he's getting older, so he doesn't give a shit anymore. I have the first 3 Wasp albums, man. Despite the many obvious differences between that scene and your own, it can be said that many of the Sunset Strip bands were in the early days fiercely DIY bands, like Motley Crue and Rat started their own record labels, self-released their albums, and so on. Do you see any similarities to that scene in your own experience? Rollins, I think in those days, Motley Crue and Black Flag had the same distribution. Remember, we were sent a few copies of the original Too Fast for Love on leather records. I think Joe Carducci, who worked at the label, kept them. I think there were similarities in that it's just a bunch of young people trying to get somewhere with their music and not be told how it's supposed to be. The genres might be different, but past that, it's just youth, ambition, anger, etc. Very interesting. So he's asked about who his favorite 80s hard rock guy is, and David Lee Roth, of course, because he always liked Van Halen. Very interesting, very fascinating interview, in my opinion, because for one, was if you wouldn't be caught dead saying that you liked or admired anything about Motley Crue or Wasp back in the day. Like if you were in a punk band, you were that was anathema to pretty much anything you were doing. Like, oh, those hair bands, man. But also that he owns the first 3 Wasp albums. I can't believe that. Hard to believe. So anyways, I'm going to talk about something else because I decided to do this episode about that. So Henry Rollins retired from music, and I just had some thoughts about that. I think he was consistent about what he said he would do, because back in the early 90s, he said, one day this will be over, and I won't have any more angst, or I don't remember how he put it, but there was tons of interviews he did where he basically said it was just, the time was going to be up eventually. So he's always talked about bands that were just too old to go on tour, and I have a grudging respect for that because I always wanted to see him live, like with Rollins' band. I'm going to put this in quotes, Black Flag in 2013. And I just the less said about it, the better. It was not what I wanted to see Black Flag be at this point. At that age, it was not very. It just wasn't. It wasn't the same, because I grew up with Black Flag. The band Flag, on the other hand, which was some other Black Flag members minus Greg Ginn, who was the main guy in the original Black Flag, I saw a lot of live stuff with them, and they sounded really good. So it's kind of sad that Black Flag, quote unquote, became what they were and what they are. And also there's a lot of controversy with Greg Ginn as well. So I'm not going to go into that. There's other resources for that. Not that, it's kind of sad. So with Rollins, he does spoken word. He does do appearances on albums occasionally. I think he was on a Thor album doing like some type of vocal. Apparently, I believe so, a couple years ago, and he also was on Flaming Lips album as like a narrator. So he does still do music related stuff once in a while, but obviously he's not doing a band, anymore. So I have respect for that. And a person that also said similar things back in the day was Grace Slick. She said she doesn't think a rocker should be up on stage past 50. And she followed through on her retirement. Like a lot of people, like her former husband, Paul Kantner, he was on stage like a few weeks before he died of cancer. Like he just took it he just was doing it till the end. So I have respect for people that do that. I think it's kind of it's a choice that you have to make. And I think there is a certain cartoonishness to someone that's like pushing late middle age and still trying to sing songs about when they were 17 or 24 or whatever. I think there is a certain caricature that can be had in that situation, and it's it depends on who it is too. But I think there is something to be said about that, which Rollins obviously talks about too in some of his interviews. He's like, well, I don't want to be like 70 years old singing, My War on stage, because I don't even relate to that song, at that age, or he's not 70 yet, I don't think, but I'm just saying, like, I think actually is he 70? No, he's 60. He's not 70 yet. Never mind. 70. He'll be 70 in about 10 or about 9 years. But I understand. I understand if someone wants to do that. That's their choice, and it's hit or miss because B.B. King can go up there when he's 80 years old. Where he did before he died, and still sound great. But obviously some of these guys aren't sounding as good. That's why you watch. I'm not going to name some of the bands, but some of the old hair bands from the 80s. I'll just say Motley Crue. Speaking of Motley Crue, you watch Vince Neil, he just doesn't have it. He can't do it. Can he get into shape to do it? Maybe. But people are really stuck in their ways when they get older. It's just a fact. Is he going to be able to do it in this tour? I don't know. A guitarist has an easier time, than our guitarist or bass player or keyboardist have easier time than a singer or drummer as far as aging. Drummer is going to slow down stuff some of the time, but singers have it the worst, of course, because that's what people complain about. Oh, I saw Bob Dylan. He sounded like the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, or I saw so and so, and they sounded terrible. It's like you're not going to have that standard that you were when you were there when they were young. So it's kind of like, I think sometimes people are just they force themselves to be in these situations, these older artists, where they're playing stuff the same way. I mean, they half-ass it, they tune lower and they sound, their voices has some wear and tear. I'm not saying there's no way to like fix their voice. Obviously sometimes, vocal cords they'll wear with age. It's like an instrument. But if you see a band live that's like 40, their classic album's 30 or 40 years old, the chances are it's going to be tuned down, slowed down maybe to some extent, and just not sound the same. And it's disappointing to see, if you're listening to an album. And that's why I won't see certain bands live anymore, because like it's just not the same experience, as it was. I won't name names right now, but it's just like certain bands I won't see live anymore because this is not the same. It's just not, If someone is just, I'll give one example is Kiss. I will not see Kiss live. Maybe if the ticket were free or something or was cheap, I never got to see Kiss, so maybe I would go see it. But like, I'm not going to go see it for more than a curiosity's sake, just to see what a Kiss show is really like in person. I'm not going to see it a second time. Absolutely not. Because it just doesn't sound the same. It just doesn't have that feel that the classic era did. I wasn't alive really for most of the 70s, so I'm not going to say how old I am, but I wasn't cognizant or alive to see Kiss back when they were at their peak in the 70s and early 80s and stuff. So I missed it, but I could have seen the reunion tour, But at that time, I hated Kiss because of all the stuff I said in the last episode. But, it's just I can't go back and see. The first time I saw Iron Maiden, was 1995. It was like, yeah, it was amazing. I don't think they won't sound as time goes on, they're not going to sound as good. They'll sound maybe 85% there, then maybe sound 75%, but they're not going to sound 100%. No band will. No band does. Glenn Hughes is superhuman, someone like that. I mean, getting back to the Phil Anselmo thing, I think he could do it possibly at this. If he thinks he can do it, he probably can. If someone thinks they can hit those notes again, I think Phil Anselmo can get into shape maybe to do that, especially if he's clean, if he is actually clean, which I believe. And someone like Bruce Dickinson, there's going to be wear and tear on their voice. They're going to sound different, and same with Rob Halford. Rob Halford's done a really good job for someone that old, though. He's maybe he's not on the level of Glenn Hughes, able to sing stuff in the same tuning exactly and get all those notes, but he's pretty close, Whereas Paul Stanley it's unbearable. And David Coverdale is like kind of in between. Like David Coverdale puts passion in at least, I mean, sometimes some of the Whitesnake stuff I've heard or seen on YouTube, it sounds like black metal. Like it's like when he sings the high notes, he's like screaming. I mean, at least he's trying, Whereas Paul Stanley, I don't feel like he's trying when I see later Kiss stuff. Like I don't think he's trying. The last time I heard Paul Stanley sound good was on his Live to Win era. I saw footage of that. So nobody's going to sound the same. The singers have it the worst, of course. That's why some of these guys are pulling out like younger singers. Like I think, Gamma Ray did that. They got a new singer. Kai Hansen quit singing for them. I mean, he still sings, but he doesn't sing all the stuff. Who else did that? I think Manila Road was the first band I saw do that. Because Mark Shelton still sang some of the songs, but like he got a younger guy to sing a lot of the vocals. And Kai Hansen did it. And Whitesnake is doing it of all things, which is really interesting. So I think it's going to be the next trend in metal is that these older bands are going to get singers that like a stand-in singer that sings some of the time or something like that. And it's sad, but we all get up there in age, It's just going to happen inevitably to all of us, And it's just it's one of those things that, like as a guitarist, I don't have to worry about. I mean, my range, I have like a 4-octave range with vocals, and I still do, but I'm not that old. But it's like obviously, if I was singing for 25 years, I might still have some of it, but like 10, 20 years down the road, I probably wouldn't, and it sucks, but it's the truth. I think that has to do with people that are in the business too for a long time, like. John Arch of Fates Warning was a carpenter or whatever for like 30 years, and he rejoined Fates Warning. He was like, he never left. Like he sounded great, on that live album a couple of years back, and that new Arch Matthews. He sounded like exactly the same as 1986. Somehow he saved his voice, but that's probably because he didn't sing that much. It gets worn out. It's an instrument. Your voice is an instrument. I now that I'm talking, I don't know if Phil Anselmo can really do it or not, but I'm just saying, thinking back to that. If he thinks he can, he probably can. But yeah, anyways, Henry Rollins and Grace Slick are, the two people I think of the most that retired in music because they just felt like they had, they were going to jump the shark or, become like Spinal Tap, as Henry Rollins used to say, even though Spinal Tap are really cool. They were going to be like, that's why he said Black Flag broke up, because he was becoming like Spinal Tap. Famously, he said that. So I think that last Jefferson Airplane album that came out in 1988 or 89 was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. If you think Starship was bad, I almost think that Jefferson Airplane album, the reunion album, was worse. It had like this boomer like 60s like retro like lyrics, but like with this sappy like adult contemporary late 80s music like mixed together. It was just awful. At least Starship didn't pretend to be like some kind of reunion. That Plains song was a Paul Kantner song or whatever the hell it was called. That was actually okay because it was kind of goofy, but the album's really bad. I'm just gonna straight up say that it sucked, you know. And that was like the last thing I remember Grace Slick doing. I think she did like some other stuff once in a while for like charity and shit, but you know, she stopped. She paints now. She's like 81 years old or whatever. Henry Rollins is getting up there too, you know. It's like they said enough was enough. They stopped. And it's sad, you know, because you want to see, you know, especially if you're a younger fan of that stuff like I am. Like, I didn't grow up with Black Flag. You know, I was too young to, like, appreciate that. I was 2 years old when, you know, some of their classic albums came out or whatever. But it's like you know, it's like you want to see that Black Flag, but you have the live stuff, you have the YouTube and the DVDs or whatever, but you're not able to do it. But there's other bands, you know, doing stuff. They're like the modern Black Flag. But another band that I saw that I was really shocked by live, and they're getting up there in age too, was Napalm Death. That was absolutely phenomenal to see them live. They were just amazing. But the one thing that I didn't like about it was Barney Greenway doesn't do this growls anymore. He just does this like hardcore yell. So it's kind of weird, but I still loved it. But yeah, it's when do you retire? When do you lose the mojo for your music? And when are you too old to sing certain lyrics? When do you? It's just kind of a rhetorical question, but you know, when are you too old to sing about, you know, dragons? I mean, like a power metal band, they're 80 years old. Okay, well, Christopher Lee was on some power metal albums, so he was pretty old at that time. Well, you know, when are you too old to sing, dare I say, Christine 16 like Kiss? I mean, that's, you know, Christine 43, you know. I mean, it's kind of messed up to see Gene Simmons like in his 60s singing Christine 16. It's hilarious, but it's kind of messed up. You know, it's like, do they really like have that like impetus to sing certain lyrics like that they related to when they were young? What do you do? Like, if lyrics are that personal, like a lot of lyrics, I write lyrics, and a lot of them are personal. Some of them aren't. I don't feel bad about, you know, if I was more of a singer, singing my lyrics at this point that I wrote. Like, the only lyrics I wouldn't like were like the 20-year-old lyrics that I wrote, like some stuff I wrote when I was a teenager that were like really angst-ridden and really pissed off and like, you know, self-pitying lyrics that I used to write. I wouldn't feel right singing that. But a lot of my other lyrics I would feel fine about, you know, I don't care. But it's like sometimes it depends on what the singer has in mind. Like Henry Rollins probably just takes those lyrics very personally. It was very personal lyrics to him. So once he cleared out his, you know, consciousness of whatever, you know, his angst that was going on, he decided to retire because he did it. And he said that. I remember interviews with him in the early 90s. He said he was gonna quit music eventually. He was hinting at it all along. He's like, yeah, it'll be over one day. You know, it's like he stuck through. You know, he probably got, you know, I'm willing to bet Black Flag, particularly, probably got offered some European or American promoter like in the last 10, 15 years. They're like, oh, we'll pay you millions of dollars to get back together. Just like I think Queensryche, like Jeff Tate said recently, they were offered like a lot of money to get back together. I'm sure they were. I'm sure Black Flag with Rollins or, you know, even Rollins band probably got offered a lot of money, but the integrity is there. You know, if he would sell out. Now, Henry Rollins has a really weird view on relationships, like with, you know, the opposite sex and stuff, because, you know, he's into women, and he's never been married. But I would say that if he were married, like if he had been married and had kids and stuff, and that inevitable divorce that often usually happens, would have happened, then, and this sounds cynical, but this is just the way it goes, then Greg Ginn, you know, maybe have some financial troubles or something, and Chuck Dukowski's like, oh man, I guess we'll get back together. It would have happened. It would have happened, because I think I would just say this. I think about probably 50% of bands that get back together, these classic bands, when they reunite years later, it's because of alimony and, divorces and stuff. And it sounds really cynical, but, look at Slash and Guns N' Roses and, the Eagles or whatever. Behind every reunion, there's divorce. I mean, I read, there's a great book. It's called Kiss and Sell by Chris Lent. He was like a financial manager for Kiss for like 20 years or something. I can't exactly remember. But he talks about the reunion. Peter Criss and Ace Frehley were both like bankrupt or something at that point. And Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were like, they had like put in this like money in Casablanca Records, like invested in coal for them. And those stocks, like they like took a dive and like they lost a lot of money and they were losing all this money and stuff. And then those Kiss conventions were going on. They're like, oh shit, we can make all our money, pay off all our debts again. And, two other guys are bankrupt or whatever. I don't know the exact story. Like, I can't recall the exact story, but I know there was a lot of financial difficulties in the Kiss camp. And I think one of them just had a divorce too back then too. I mean, had a divorce recently too. I remember Peter Criss was like on a talk show because there was this guy that was like an imposter guy that was homeless or something, and people thought Peter Criss was homeless. It's just that was around that same time too. So if you read all the autobiographies, you're like, and there's even footage of like Ace Frehley talking about his financial troubles back then, like from back then. It was like, wow, holy shit. Yeah, it was like, and I'm not trying to talk shit about Kiss. I'm just saying, like, that was an impetus for them getting back together. It's always about, usually reunions are about money. You're losing money. Iron Maiden, they lost a lot of money in the 90s with Blaze Bayley. They were playing clubs, they were still playing, they were still trying, but, they weren't doing so well. So, obviously, getting Bruce and Adrian back was it was inevitable because they had to make that money again. Metal came back, around that time too, sort of. So it was inevitable. It was pretty much inevitable that they would get back together and tour, with the original, or not original lineup, but one of the classic lineups plus Yannick Gers, which is another story, controversially, even though I do like Yannick Gers. I don't think Yannick Gers is actually to blame for any bad parts of New Maiden at all. Like, I think he's actually pretty good, like, as far as songwriting and stuff. I think he comes up with the more interesting stuff nowadays some of the time. So, nothing against Yannick. A lot of people are against Yannick, but I don't think he's like the issue. If people have an issue with Maiden, which they do, I'll admit, people do. I'm just going to say, if they do, it's not Yannick Gers' fault. It's not his fault. I know his style is a bit odd, idiosyncratic, and in a certain way, but it's not his fault. Like some of the better songs, The Legacy, I can name like a couple other songs. What was that? The Alchemist or whatever. I liked a lot of the songs that he wrote in the last 20 years. I think he wrote some better stuff, some more interesting songs than some of the other guys sometimes too. So, or co-wrote some more interesting songs too. So yeah, bands reunite because someone has a divorce or is doing financially bad. And they say, we had to put aside our differences and it was all for the art, man. Everybody knows that that's bullshit at this point. I think most people are so cynical that they definitely know that it's bullshit that when bands say that. Of course bands say that, like, oh, well, we finally got back together and we're doing better than ever, man. As a band, we're like getting along a lot better now. And there's a divorce, that they had to go through and, all that. So, but yeah. Anyways, that was just kind of a rant about bands reuniting and Jefferson Airplane and Rollins of all things. But that's admirable. How do I feel about like playing music that I wrote 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever? Like when 20 years from now, how do I feel about it? Fine.
because as far as like my life, I don't feel like when I write a song, it's like dependent on some type of nostalgic thing that happens to me. I feel like when I write a song, it's not necessarily mine. Like, it sounds weird, but it's like when I write a song, I feel like it's other people's. It's not only mine. I could share it with other people. If people can get out of the song I write stuff that I might not be able to get out of. So therefore, I could play it forever. Obviously, like I said, I can't play like some of the poems I used to write when I was a teenager. If I made one of those into songs, I would cringe. Into a song, I would cringe. Some of them I have actually written, poems when I was a kid that I turned into songs later, but they were more like about dreams and like psychedelic kind of stuff and fantasy. I didn't write like one of the first songs I wrote when I was 12 years old was "I'm Pissed Off." I'm pissed off. So I probably couldn't do that now and feel good about it, or when I'm like 50, I don't think I'll be singing that song. It wasn't a very good song, by the way. It was pretty shitty, but I'm pissed off. Like 2 riffs or something. I wrote it when I was 12, yeah. I couldn't sing that when I'm 70 years old. I definitely couldn't in like 30 years or whatever. Yeah, I can't. I mean, there's certain things you can sing, there's certain things you can't. But I like the song for the song too. But like people like Henry Rollins or Grace Slick probably just write songs that are really personal to them. They're like, this is like what I'm going through in life, and I have to write it down and I have to sing it. So if I'm singing it later and when I don't feel that way, I just see music in a different way than them. But I respect their right and their integrity not to view their music or their lyrics the same way as other people may view their own lyrics, when they write a song. The song is not mine when I write it. When I write a song, it's mine, but it's also other people's because I like people to think with the lyrics. I like to stimulate their mind. I like to give them an adventure. It's more like writing a song is like writing a story. Whereas some of these people that write songs, like Rollins, of course, it was like... so I remember this review of Rollins' band, End of Silence, where Robert Palmer, not the singer, but Robert Palmer, one of the greatest... I think Rolling Stone is a pile of trash nowadays, just to get that out there as a disclaimer. But Robert Palmer, back in the 80s, Robert Palmer was a writer for Rolling Stone, great writer for Rolling Stone, one of the best writers, along with like Lester Bangs and... Matt Taibbi is not really a writer for Rolling Stone. He's more a political writer, but I'm not going to talk about politics. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to say he's one of the greatest writers for Rolling Stone. And he wrote like a lot of Danzig reviews, and he also wrote Rollins' band, End of Silence. And he mentioned it's like a Plastic Ono band, like it's this like scream therapy for Rollins to do this album. And I believe Robert Palmer wrote that review anyways. I don't think he gave it a very good review. I think it was like 2.5 stars or 3 stars. And maybe it wasn't Robert Palmer that did that review. I'm trying to remember, but because he actually used to cover Black Flag too early on. I don't think he was with Rolling Stone at the time, but maybe he was. But he was like, it's a scream therapy. It's like a Plastic Ono band. John Lennon used to say it was like this therapy for him and stuff or something like that. Like songs like Mother and all this other stuff. So with Rollins, when he wrote a song, it was actual therapy for him. When other people write a song, it's like Bob Dylan or Hansi Kirsch. They're telling a story, and they identify with parts of the story at times, but they also want other people to enjoy the story and to feel that story, and they get into that role, or they play a role. Like King Diamond, he's playing a role in the band, or Mattowarrior. They're playing a role. It's fun, or Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper plays a role with Alice Cooper. That's why he's 75 years old or whatever. He's still doing Alice Cooper. He sounds great, by the way. But yeah, that's how different musicians and different lyricists do things differently. But I respect Rollins and Grace Slick for following through on their words and actually retiring. Unlike all these people that say, I'm going to retire next year. Ozzy, I'll retire next year. 2 years later, he's back on the road. I'm going to retire next year. I'm going to break up next year. Oh, next year. Oh, we're going to get back together next. Oh, we'll get back together. Oh, we just felt it was. Oh, you just go back and forth like for 10, 20 fucking years until one of them dies or something. It's stupid, you know? Grace Slick and Henry Rollins have my respect for that, for actually following through on what they said. That's all.